Welcome to The Digital Patient, where we discuss the latest advancements in digital patient engagement and share stories from the front lines. I'm your host, Alan Sardana, and with me as always is SeamlessMD's CEO, Dr. Joshua Liu. Today we're joined by our very special guest, Dr. Eric Alper. Dr. Alper is VP Chief Quality Officer and Chief Clinical Informatics Officer at UMass Memorial Healthcare in Massachusetts. Dr. Alper, Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today. You've had such a prolific career at the intersections of clinical care, quality, and informatics. And I'm really curious to learn more about your background and the foundations, like why medicine in the first place, and how did you get into quality?
Yeah. I just always knew that I wanted to go into medicine in some way. My mom was a nurse and she kind of convinced me to go, although she wanted me to be a plastic surgeon. But I think I just kind of gravitated toward the sciences. And as I first got into practice, I've just always been looking for ways to make things function better, to innovate, to deliver higher quality results, higher quality care. And through college, I wound up doing a number of classes on computer science and ways to deliver educational content most effectively. This was kind of just before the internet, but thinking about hyperlinking and making it easy for people to get to content. As a medical student, I actually started to build an educational platform called Histological, which an educational program, which I joined a convention back then and shared some of this. It was called the SCAMC, this is Symposium for Computer Applications in Medical Care, which I think was the precursor for HIMSS. This was back in must have been the early 90s. So, and just as I got more clinically engaged, just saw more opportunities for ways to use technology to help deliver better outcomes in the way that we provide care. So it's just been kind of, I think, a natural evolution for what my interests are.
So I would say we've definitely talked with chief quality officers, we've talked to informatics and digital leaders. Very rare for someone to be both the chief quality officer and the chief informatics officer to health system. How did that happen exactly? And then what does it mean to be someone in your role? Because it is quite uncommon.
Yeah, it's a great question. Now, there aren't many of us around, but there are a handful. The way it happened, first of all, I started out more in the quality space. And to me, it became very clear very early that in order for us to improve quality and to improve safety, that you needed to leverage systems and implement the IT systems to help to drive those kinds of improvements. There's only so many times I can tell someone to wash their hands, but if I can, add an order set and deliver that electronically so they see the right answer every single time, you make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing, then they do it. So I think that it's just a natural linkage that in my mind has kind of grown over, more and more time. After spending my first years as the patient safety officer for the healthcare system, I did more of a turn directly into informatics by working on developing standard order sets and then subsequently doing IT rollouts. Became a CMIO, implemented Epic at Lifespan in Providence, Rhode Island, and then subsequently came back to UMass and implemented Epic here. And then shortly after we completed our rollout, was asked by my CEO to become the chief quality officer as well. And again, I think that there's just there's overlapping circles of informatics and of quality. I love the space that's right in the center of those two things, but I like the other work in quality. I like the other work in IT as well. And so far I've been able to, I think, do both pieces well. But if I'm able to make that center part where with the intersection of quality and informatics especially successful, then I consider myself successful.
Yeah, it reminds me, I think, decades ago, technology was seen as more of a back office, function in healthcare, but now it's been elevated because people realize, hey, tech can be an enabler of better care, higher quality care. And I think your story is an excellent example of that.
Yeah, actually, I was going to answer this a little later in the call, but I heard this yesterday, and I think this really resonates. I think that health systems are now technology companies. They have to be. In order to be effective and to be able to deliver the care. They never used to be, they use technology in order to deliver care initially just a little bit and just more and more over time. But now some healthcare systems develop technology and push that out there, but you can't do medicine without technology these days.
Today's episode is brought to you by DeepScribe, AI clinical documentation that physicians and health systems love, documenting specialty and complex care with ease and precision. Josh, have you heard all the buzz around ambient AI and virtual scribes?
Definitely. Clinicians are spending hours a day on documentation, so improving their day-to-day and reducing burnout is huge right now. You and I have seen quite a few product demos for ambient this year, but I have to say, DeepScribe was one of the most impressive.
Well, Josh, you trained as a clinician. What stood out to you most about DeepScribe?
Well, using AI to transcribe and summarize the clinician-patient conversation is honestly table stakes right now. But a big challenge for CMIOs and CIOs is driving actual clinician adoption. So what really impressed me about DeepScribe is how well it can be customized to different specialties and workflows with dozens of templates as starting points. That would be critical to me as a clinician because I just don't have time to build templates from scratch.
So true. For me, I was particularly impressed by the auditable notes. You can highlight any part of a note, and then DeepScribe shows you exactly where in the transcript the note was generated from, so you can find that evidence right away. That builds trust.
Oh, exactly. Being able to confirm that something wasn't hallucinated is so important for clinician trust and safety.
Yeah, that same attention to detail that led to really high clinician adoption is also resulting with clinicians saving up to 75% of documentation time.
Wow, that's incredible. But how is DeepScribe's accuracy with specialty care or complex cases?
That's the best part. DeepScribe's proprietary LLM, Keel AI, is trained on over 3 million patient conversations. It's then further tuned by specialty and subspecialty cases, making it way more accurate than GPT-4-based solutions. Pair that accuracy with DeepScribe's customization studio to personalize the experience for different clinician preferences and workflows, and it becomes incredibly flexible.
Alan, speaking of flexibility, I could use some yoga myself. Flexibility is key when it comes to working with health systems with so many moving parts. DeepScribe sounds fantastic. Where can health systems learn more?
About your yoga? I don't think they want to. But about DeepScribe, check out deepscribe.ai. That's deepscribe.ai to learn more. One of the super impressive initiatives that's been pretty vocalized at UMass over the past couple of years has been this hospital at home initiative. I read recently you've admitted it's 2,000 patients into the programs. That's like huge kudos to you and your team. It's amazing. From its initial rollout, I think, 2 years ago or 2-ish years ago, you started slowly. Let's get our first 5 patients in, then our next 10. What have been some of the biggest learnings from that program? And could you share maybe some of the key change management strategies that were critical in making it all the way to scale now at 2,000 patients?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we decided to stand up the hospital at home program. I'd say relatively early. We weren't on the bleeding edge of this, but we were one of probably the first 100 health systems that decided to do this. And we did it initially largely because we have significant challenges with access to hospital beds, where we constantly have borders in our emergency department. And this was also during COVID, when there was a lot of focus on obviously using digital to enhance the way that we provide care, telehealth. But I think once the waiver was announced by CMS that would allow us to get some payment to take care of patients at home, then our leadership was all in on this. We made a substantial investment up front. And again, the goal for this was to try to deliver care in the home in a way that would allow us to keep the patients who really needed to be in the hospital in the hospital. We're routinely turning away probably 25% of patients that people ask us to take and transfer. We just don't have space for them. That was the primary mission that we wanted to achieve. I think that one of the biggest lessons learned, certainly for me, has been the fact that hospital at home is actually a better way to take care of patients who require acute care than being in the hospital itself. There are so many things that can happen to patients when they're in the hospital. They are effectively immobilized. They're not allowed to get up and walk to the bathroom. They become weak. They wind up needing to go to skilled nursing facilities. They develop pressure sores. They get infections. With hospital at home, these things are almost non-existent. Plus the fact that it winds up giving the patient that much better an experience. They don't have to wear a hospital Johnny. They don't have a roommate that's screaming, in the middle of the night and keeping them awake, unless that's what their spouse is already. I'm not sure. But they get to eat their own food. It's just an entirely different experience. And again, the outcomes are superior Now, not every patient qualifies for hospital at home, but there are many patients that we think actually could receive care at home that currently aren't. And I think that's been really our mission now is number one, to preserve the waiver and make sure that we can continue to get payment for hospital at home care. But number two is to increase the awareness about the program from our legislators, our patients, our physicians, so that they will recognize these patients and get them into the program. The patient acquisition component, finding patients who are good candidates for hospital at home, is very labor intensive. And again, I think that we need to get to a point where we need to flip the switch where, when patient comes into the emergency department and we decide you're going to be admitted to the hospital, it's not the exception that you go to hospital at home, but it's the rule that you go to hospital at home unless you really need to be in the hospital for some reason, that you need that advanced care, or you need critical care, you need some sort of a device that you can't get at home. So those are probably my two greatest learnings. Better care. Yes, it does help to relieve that inpatient overload burden. And then you can't underestimate the amount of work in current state that it's going to take to keep the program going in terms of finding patients who are candidates.
Go ahead, Eric.
Please, I was going to answer your second question, Alan, but go ahead, Josh, please.
Well, we definitely want to go back to it too. I guess one question that came up was around patient enrollment. I'm curious, I'm assuming it sounds like right now, because it's still a novel thing, patients get approached and they have to, I guess, in some ways consent to have hospital at home. I'm curious what % of approached patients actually are on board with it? And of those who aren't on board with it, what are the most common sort of objections or barriers you run into?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's probably, some patients you approach and you say, you can go home to get care. They're like, absolutely, I don't want to be in the hospital. Some, I think, are still just nervous about the concept of being home, getting care at home, and that they feel like they're not going to be safe in their home, which, again, we've shown, and many others have shown, that it really is quite safe to receive care at home. Then, sometimes it's the family members that are skeptical of the model. Sometimes I do think that family members use a loved one's hospitalization as a little bit of a respite from the care that they provide. So it varies. And then sometimes it's a physician issue as well. I think our overall conversion rate from referral to getting patients home it's less than 50%. So I'm guessing it's probably around 30% is the patient. Some of that is the family as well. And then, 30% of the time it's the physicians that are just not willing to let the patient go.
I guess part of it too is as this sort of model of care gets normalized, and then you have past patients and families who can share their experience saying, hey, it actually went really well. Here's why it was better. And the next time it happens, it's not so new anymore. And that comfort level should improve over time, I would imagine.
Totally. That's what we see as patients that have been in the hospital at home before. When they hit the emergency department, they say, I want to get admitted to the hospital at home. They don't want to go back to the hospital bed. So those are the easy sells. And this was going to get back to your other question, Alan, is, what are some of the strategies that were crucial in helping to scale this program? It's telling those stories. We've been trying to get some of the story. We get letters from our patients in the program all the time, and they are so powerful. Also, our caregivers who go into the home, who talk about the fact that it's kind of restored their faith in why they chose to do medicine, because they go into the home, they interact with the patient, they have much more time. They're not getting called to see another patient at the same time. They're getting greeted by pets. They're getting hugs from family members. You just don't get that in the hospital. I think that these kinds of stories have been really effective in helping to tell the story to the rest of the organization. And, as many people we can tell this to. I think also making sure that we've been tracking our data and that we have the data that corresponds to our outcomes has also been super helpful. Having leadership support, having, outstanding project manager and team leadership. Again, these are just all fundamental to any kind of program that you're trying to launch and grow.
Can I ask you, you've been pretty proactive about kind of exploring how do we grow eligibility for this program, maybe different clinical areas or conditions or indications. I'm curious, I'm assuming that, let's say CMS hasn't given guidance on here are the 30 ones you should do. I'm guessing you're still kind of breaking new ground all the time. How do you end up deciding what the right new areas might be that you could grow hospital at home to? Is it more like a group discussion with certain clinical leaders and departments? Like, how do you figure out what actually makes sense for this type of model?
Yeah, I think we're trying to continue to grow the number of patients overall that we're getting. So we started out by not really thinking about the surgical services because they're all part of a bundled payment model, and it's not really possible for us to get any additional reimbursement for the care that is provided when the patient goes home. So that wasn't part of our initial set of patients that we wanted to include. Subsequently, again, because we get so much more value out of clearing the bed in the hospital and can get the patient who really needs to be there in that bed, then we've started to, again, we take a little bit of a loss on the program in order to help the health system to accomplish more of its goals. And we've been happy to do that. We've been trying to think about what procedures patients are winding up getting, kind of stuck in the hospital because we can't do them at home. And then we are trying to see, can we really deliver some of these things in the home, like blood transfusions? We've just started to do blood transfusions for patients that are in the hospital at home. Dialysis, right now, we don't have the ability to do dialysis for patients at home. We would love to be able to offer that, and we're exploring ways to do that. So those are a few of the areas, but, trying to keep on expanding the potential patients that are available. And then one thing I just learned is that we're capping a lot. We don't have capacity because of our nursing staff, because of our physician staff. And, again, so we've got to eliminate the barriers to growth from that perspective also.
So Eric, Josh and I were at HIMSS this year, and we got to hear you talk about the hospital at home program. And one of the unexpected benefits that you mentioned was around safety and safety for caregivers. And I was curious if you could unpack that for us and maybe share with the audience what exactly was safer about the program and what was the unexpected benefit around that.
Yeah, sure. We've been concerned about when you send a nurse or a paramedic or anyone into a home that you just don't know what kind of an environment you're sending them into. It's far less controlled than you would think than what you would see inside the hospital. So clearly we're concerned about staff safety. We want to make sure that we know where our staff are at all times. But I think it just only occurred to us recently that we really ought to be measuring the level of workplace violence that we're seeing in the hospital at home. Again, it's been very well reported that we're seeing large increases in workplace violence in our hospitals and our emergency departments. Our staff are getting injured repeatedly, and there have been some, quite horrific stories as well, including one that came from one of the hospitals of our healthcare system within the last 5 years or so. So I think that the hospital and the emergency department have become much more unsafe places for our staff, to the extent that I think that people are getting injured and they're asking themselves, do I really want to work in this environment? The striking finding for us is that there's been hardly any violence to our patients when they go into patients' homes, that our staff are generally incredibly welcomed. They're not being hit by patients. They're not encountering any significant problems in the communities that they're driving into. And overall, it's effectively zero, the amount of workplace violence we're seeing. Of course, we still need to have precautions in place, and we continue to work to make sure that our staff are as safe as they possibly can be when they go into an unknown environment. But that was the insight.
It's fascinating to me because many, many years ago, I did some research on barriers to doing physician house calls. And when I surveyed clinicians, one of the top 3 barriers was concerns around safety in an unknown home environment. But it's fascinating to hear from your experience that actually it seems like might be safer than actually their normal work in the hospital or the ED. And so that actually, to your point, might be motivating for folks who've been thinking about doing, whether it's hospital home or maybe house calls more or whatnot, getting more care in the home. It sounds like this may overcome a lot of those objections. That's really exciting to hear.
Yeah, you said it really well, Josh. I hope that other hospital home programs document this as well.
Yeah, well, they will now. Now that we're getting the word out, they won't out.
Totally. So, Eric, AI is obviously the hot topic right now. Everybody's talking about AI in digital health. I'm curious from your perspectives, like, what do you find could be the lowest hanging fruit with the highest ROI versus what do you think might be a little overhyped right now?
Yeah. So we've actually been using AI for probably 5 years now. And the place that we're seeing the greatest adoption is in radiology. Our radiologists have been using it for image recognition and for detection of certain clinical conditions for quite a while. I was actually shocked to learn recently that we've grown our number of use cases to 17 different things that our AI is screening for and is basically working as kind of that co-pilot for the radiologist. It's detecting early pulmonary embolisms, or small pulmonary PEs. It's detecting small intracranial hemorrhage and sometimes large ones as well. But, it's the kind of thing where it will help to prioritize a scan that a radiologist should look at, but also to the extent that it's able to see things that maybe the radiologist might overlook in some cases. I think the image-related AI is going to be where we see a lot of the real value. We have one other use case for this is by using a platform that's doing retinal scanning in patients in rural primary care areas where it's for patients who have diabetes, they need to see an ophthalmologist every year or so to look for signs of diabetic retinopathy. And by capturing a photo of the retina on these patients, the AI is able to do a screen and to say, it looks like this patient does have retinopathy. Those are the ones that need to go see the ophthalmologist versus patients that have no signs of retinopathy, in which case they are not able to. And our rates of screening for retinopathy and getting the patients to ophthalmologists is relatively low overall. So this is a real benefit to creating greater access to a specialty kind of a service and, right in your primary care physician's office. I think that these kinds of image recognition types of tools is really where we have the lowest hanging fruit right now.
I love this.
I'm sorry, please go ahead on that one.
Oh, I was going to say, Eric, I love this screening example because you're not making diagnosis with it, but you're able to more efficiently triage low to high risk patients, or at least likely to be at high risk to get that referral to, let's say, an ophthalmologist much, much sooner. So more efficient coordination of resources that way. One of the things that I think about when it comes to using AI as a co-pilot for something like imaging is if you're an established radiologist with years of experience, it makes sense to me that you already know how to read these images. The co-pilot makes things more efficient. But I guess, do you ever worry that for these up-and-coming trainees who are basically getting a co-pilot maybe from day one, they haven't had to read images on their own historically, will they lose out on the training because they can almost have these rely on the co-pilot from day one? But then the other hand, I think about how with ECGs, we've had some form of AI for decades, and cardiologists could still read ECGs super well from scratch, right? They haven't, not been able to for the last decade. So maybe I'm over worrying about reliance on co-pilots. Curious if you have any thoughts about whether you worry about the next trainees and being overly reliant on a co-pilot.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing can probably be said about physician order entry. I think for me, when I was learning how to write orders for a patient when they were being admitted to the hospital, then I needed to start with a blank piece of paper and then I'd write it all down. And then we moved to checklist papers. It's not about how you generate the orders, but it's about making sure that you're not forgetting something. Yeah. So it becomes a different task. It's a little bit of a higher order task. Probably the AI is going to be the same way in terms of it's good to have that backup system. I'm a believer in the, what's the teachable moment, and maybe that AI could help that ongoing learning of our providers. And I also think about, what if you disagree with the AI and how do you handle that? Because, sometimes the AI is going to be wrong, as we also know. So it does create a whole new dimension, I think, to the discussion about how we're going to be training. And again, even radiologists and other physicians who have been in practice for all this time, it's like another presence in the room. How do you use it most effectively as it really gets built up?
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm also, I have to say, really excited about ambient documentation. I think that has probably the greatest potential to reduce the documentation burden that the clinicians currently have. And we're just about to stand up version 2 of our ambient, and we're hopeful that use of generative AI is going to be really transformative for our clinicians.
Today's episode is brought to you by SeamlessMD, which enables health systems to digitize patient care journeys, leading to lower lengths of stay, readmissions, and costs. Josh, you used to be a doctor. Did you ever feel like patients showed up unprepared for surgery? Or maybe you felt like you were sending patients into a black hole after discharge?
All the time. We give patients paper and verbal instructions, which are so easy to forget and really hard to follow. And we have no idea what happens to them outside the hospital. So what happens? Well, because we worry about them, we keep patients in hospital longer, but that drives up length of stay and lowers throughput. Plus, after they leave, patients get readmitted for infections and all kinds of problems that we could have just caught earlier if we monitored patients.
What if I told you there was a way to give every patient a virtual companion so you could automatically engage and monitor them through a surgery, a cancer journey, or a chronic care journey, and drop the length of stay, increase throughput, and lower readmissions?
Gosh, Alan, that would be amazing.
So that is exactly what SeamlessMD does. It allows health systems to engage patients on their own phone, tablet, or computer with automated reminders, education, and symptom monitoring. Basically a GPS through any healthcare journey.
That sounds fantastic, but does it actually work?
It does. Health systems have done over 40 studies and evaluations showing how they use the solution to reduce length of stay by 1 to 2 days, readmissions by up to 89%, and costs by over $1,000 per patient.
But how does that work with my EHR?
That's the best part. SeamlessMD is the only solution in this space with direct integration partnerships with Epic and MyChart, Oracle Cerner, and Meditech.
Well, I am getting a colonoscopy soon, so I really need something like this. Where can my health system learn more?
Well, Josh, thanks for letting me know. Your health is very important, and endoscopy is just one out of the 50 plus out-of-the-box care plans available today on SeamlessMD. Go to www.seamless.md. That's www.seamless.md to learn more.
Can I ask you on that note, talking to different informatics and digital leaders, how they think about success for ambient. Some focus more on measuring clinician well-being. Some are hoping it reduces, time spent on documentation. From your perspective, what are the main criteria you're going to use to decide, is this actually successful for us?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tough question because there are many different ways that you could kind of look through the lens to try to figure out if it's going to be helpful. Is it pajama time? Is it reduced clinician burnout? Is it additional productivity that you're going to be able to get from making people more efficient? I think there is some early data that suggests that that might be the case for some people, that they actually can see more patients, or they'll organically add more patients if you make them more efficient with their documentation. Certainly, there's some value for the clinicians that are already using scribes. And if you're able to switch them over to a less expensive documentation model, and that is acceptable, then I think that that's going to lead to some savings. But to me, again, as a clinician leader, I'm always looking to just make it as easy as possible for people to do their work. And I think if we can make people happier with the work that they're doing and relieve some of the burden, then I'm going to consider that a success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eric, I've also heard you speak in the past when referring to AI as it could be a great way to create safety nets for the health system and healthcare delivery today. I'm curious if you were referring to the radiology scans or just more broadly. Can you maybe expand on that thought?
Yeah, I think I that's exactly where I think that AI is going to go in the end state. Is there's just so much information that's present in patients' charts, and so much that primary care physicians and other clinicians, other physicians need to do in order to deliver optimal high-quality care to patients. I think we still know that from some of the research that's been done that when you go to the physician, the chance that you're going to wind up getting the care that you're expected to receive in that visit is around 50%. Having an AI that's working in the background in patients' charts, that's synthesizing information in a way that your brain just can't do in the time that you have to see patients, to give you reminders, to give you the additional information around care gaps that need to be closed. I think that's going to be incredibly helpful. We've just put together within the last couple of years a team of people that are working on actionable findings. These are if you have a chest x-ray, you go into the emergency department, you have a chest x-ray because maybe the doctor thinks you have pneumonia, and maybe you do, but we also see that you've got a lung nodule that's there. And, could that be cancer? Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just it's just a shadow, and it's going to need some follow-up. Most of the time, it turns out to be nothing. But we do know that some percentage of those wind up going on to becoming cancerous at some point in time. And, this is certainly for the emergency physician that did the chest x-ray. This is the last thing on their mind when they're reading your x-ray. So how do you make sure as a healthcare system, as a chief quality officer, that every single one of those incidental findings or actionable findings winds up getting appropriate follow-up, and that patients wind up getting that follow-up study before it turns into something else? Right now, we've hired a team of people to go into all those charts and to make telephone calls and to verify that those tests are being done in follow-up. But AI can probably do that also at some point, to be able to recognize these things that require follow-up, that require additional intervention, that it'll point out to clinicians, and ultimately we'll be able to deliver much higher quality care.
I have to say, Eric, that's actually very admirable, because I can imagine a lot of health systems might say, well, yeah, we found the nodule they weren't looking for, and we put in the discharge, note from the ED, hey, you should probably get this followed up with. But the fact that you have a team that's actually trying to figure out, did the follow-up happen? Have we closed the loop on this topic? That's really admirable from a quality and safety point of view. So kudos to you and your team. I don't know how common that is.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm grateful to my leadership for providing support to do this. It's not entirely altruistic, I have to say. I mean, again, these are the kinds of things that lead to lawsuits, and lawsuits are also expensive. That if we fail to diagnose someone, look, it was right there. You read that there was this nodule on the x-ray and you never followed up. It doesn't happen commonly, but I think that there's enough of a business case for us to do that. To again, if we can make our health system work to do the right thing and to still receive payment for the kinds of activities that we're doing that lead to the right outcomes, then that's when I think we work the best.
Yeah.
We're not always incentivized to do it, but I think, again, it's the right thing to do.
Well, as the quality leader, certainly the incentives support quality. It makes your life and your job easier too.
Absolutely.
And when it doesn't, I guess it's pretty hard. So,
it's really hard. I mean, medicine is just incredibly complicated, and the types of things that we're doing to patients every day in the operating room and on our wards and in our clinics is just getting more and more complex. And, to anticipate and intervene before every kind of event is really, really hard. So, we see all kinds of different things, and we've got a really good process for when we have a problem of doing the root cause analysis and doing our best to close the loop. And frequently that's with Epic, and sometimes it's with devices, and sometimes it's with training. But again, I think AI in the future may be a way to be a tool that we can implement to help to reduce some of these slips.
Yeah. So Eric, actually a question kind of in line with that thinking. The modern healthcare today is complex. It's incredibly complex, and there are so many different solutions that you can put in place to solve some of these challenges, but then that comes with competing priorities. And so I'm curious how you and your team decide which technologies to actually pursue, what's going to be the best fit for everyone without overwhelming staff and patients. Like, what's your decision criteria for prioritization of all these projects?
Yeah, as you know, there's no shortage of priorities. There is increasing regulation, and then every area, obviously, the technology keeps on getting better, and everybody wants to have the best technology so that they can deliver the best care for their patients. And so it truly is a real challenge in taking our limited resources and deciding what we want to do. I think that certainly if we have a strategy, a system level strategy that we're trying to achieve, and we look for solutions that will help to solve the problems that ultimately will help us to achieve our strategy, our strategic goals. And frequently technology is part of the way that we solve those things. I think part of the intangible is looking at the different solutions that are out there that are built by, vendors like you all and others, to say what's going to be the most likely to help us to solve that problem. and which vendor is going to be the best one for us to work with. That's going to ultimately be a great partner with us and will work with us to make us as successful as possible. There certainly is a sensitivity about overwhelming our staff, as we introduce all this new technology for them, and, making sure that they're able to adopt it, and same with our patients. And, generally speaking, what I find is that, back to Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. I think if you give people a really good solution, then it sometimes it takes months or years before they come on board, but almost always people will come along if you offer something that truly is going to either make it easier for people to do their jobs, or that will get them, the patients, the care that they need. And you do it in a way that's not going to overburden the staff. It's just, there's a complex calculus in these kinds of rollouts. I think that's really the key, is trying to make the best decisions around what's going to really solve the problems, and then finding the best tools that will most likely solve that problem.
That makes sense. So last question that I had, aside from the incredible work that you're doing in healthcare and within the system, you also have a passion for photography. And I was just so delighted to see some of your work and during a bit of my research. I'm curious, does your art influence your approach at all to healthcare technology, or is it purely just an outlet outside of work?
And thank you so much for looking at my website and for, detecting my love for photography. I think that it truly mostly is my passion outside of my work life, probably one of the only hobbies that I have. But I do definitely find a way to bring this into healthcare a bit, in that I always put one of my photos as our Epic login screen. I like taking photos of landscapes and wildlife. Lots of people have commented to me about this. I don't think that every health system does this, but, because you can choose your own custom splash screen. Many of them use the one that's out of the box from Epic. But just having something that's really tranquil and soothing and beautiful. When you log into Epic, every single room has these screens up and running when you first go in. So I find that helps to create, again, just a little bit of zen in a place where there's just a lot of chaos. I think helping to emphasize a little bit of that calm and that spirituality. Again, here at UMass, this is the place where mindfulness really got its start, with the work that John Kabat-Zinn did here in setting this up in the 1970s and 80s. And we've continued to try to push our program in mindfulness. We make that available to all of our employees at very low cost. But I think that creating that sense that healthcare it's a vocation, it's a job, but there are ways to do it in ways that you can also experience beauty and spirituality as you take care of patients. I guess that's kind of where the junction is for me.
Yeah. No, I love that. And especially, changing the splash screen around, that's such a great reminder to folks every time that they're logging in, that they're connected to something larger, and that, in your work in particular, it is really these vast landscapes, and it's such a great reminder to the stillness, but then that perfectly timed photo capture of, movement and everything. It's really, really beautiful stuff.
Eric, follow-up question for you. Has any of your photography time gotten shifted to time spent on using generative AI for images?
I have resisted that so far. I've seen some incredible images that have been generated by some other of my peers in the space, and it is really cool and beautiful. I tend to be an early adopter of many of these kinds of things, but for some reason I've just been slow in that one. But I have to say that another thing that draws me to photography is the technology. As much as I enjoy getting out there and capturing a beautiful image, bringing it back and working on it in software and making it even more beautiful and compelling is part of the draw for me. And then, so having AI generate an image for me and then tweaking it that way, I think would be a little less satisfying for me.
I can see. Yeah,
totally. I can see that as well. Awesome. Well, Eric, just being mindful of your time, we're going to flip over to the Fast 5 lightning round. So this is just 5 rapid fire questions for you to get to know you a little bit better for our audience. The first question we have is, what is your favorite book or book you've gifted the most?
So I'd say that from a business perspective, probably a good to great or crucial conversations would be on the list. And then my favorite recent book is Project Hail Mary, just a great sci-fi way to build science into a real, just very engaging story.
Yeah, love it. Question 2, who is a person, either dead or alive, who you'd love to meet?
Barack Obama.
Nice. Yeah. Question 3, would you rather have super strength, super speed, or the ability to read people's minds?
Well, I'm not really interested in the ability to read people's minds, and I already have super strength, so I guess I would say super speed.
I love that. So humble, yeah. Question 4, what is something in healthcare you believe that others might find insane?
I put a couple things down here. First of all, the fact that we still use pagers. Again, we're supposed to be so technology forward and still using something so antiquated. I guess I'd say that, just how incredibly broken our healthcare payment system is and how this leads to poorer outcomes and poor incentives. And then finally, again, this is where I was going to say that healthcare is really now a technology business.
Right. Yeah, totally. And, I love what you were saying earlier about when the incentives are aligned with the business case and doing the right thing. Like, it's such a beautiful thing. And that's what really moves you and gets you, motivated to work. So totally agree there. Last question that we have, if you could travel back in time to any event or moment, what would it be and why?
I would love to witness when we first landed on the moon. I think that was just a hallmark moment. I really love astronomy and the whole idea of space travel. And I think that would be an awesome thing to experience from the start.
Yeah, totally. Were you at all in the path for the solar eclipse that just happened? Were you? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking for photography on that, but
yeah. I can send you my photos. We drove up to Burlington, Vermont,
cool.
And we got the 3 minutes of totality there, and it was an incredible experience.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That's awesome. Well, Eric, we won't take up all of your time today. We'll end the show there, but do want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and sharing your wisdom with us and our audience. That's a wrap for this episode of The Digital Patient, hosted by SeamlessMD. You can follow us on Twitter at SeamlessMD. And if you like the podcast and you want to learn more, visit www.seamless.md. Again, Eric, Dr. Alper, thank you so much for spending the hour with us today.
It was truly a joy. Thanks so much for having me.